that would target the culture that African Americans could directly and easily relate to. And we served it.
Hollywood thought this secret would be buried forever. Don Cornelius, the soul of Soul Train, the man who turned black music into a national symbol. But behind those dazzling lights lay dark secrets that shocked the world. Secrets of Playboy exposed a haunting story. 2 young women vanished for 3 days inside Don's locked house. A VIP circle so powerful that every accusation against Don seemed to vanish into silence. Reports of violent outbursts mentioned in the press over the years left more cracks in his image. And then, in 2012, the tragic death of Don Cornelius made the secrets surrounding him even more haunting. It left behind a question that has never been answered. Was Don Cornelius an immortal cultural legend, or a man carrying Hollywood's darkest secret? Unveiling the Playboy secret, 3 days of hell. Inside Don Cornelius's house. Los Angeles nights in the 1970s always glittered with lights. Music echoed from Hollywood clubs where powerful men and young women jostled for a chance at stardom. In that atmosphere, the name Don Cornelius appeared like a special guest. He wasn't just a TV host. In his sharp suit and Mr. Cool demeanor, Cornelius embodied a rising cultural era. But in the docuseries Secrets of Playboy 2022, PJ Maston, a former bunny mother who managed dozens of Playboy bunnies from 1972 to 1982, recalled one fateful night that shattered his image. A story that sent chills through America. According to Maston, 2 sisters barely 19 or 20, baby bunnies still naive, were invited by Cornelius to a private party. They thought it was their chance to step into a glittering world where soul funk and disco stars gathered. They had no idea the door closing behind them would lead to 3 days of torment. For those 3 days, no one at the Playboy Mansion heard from them. No phone calls, no sign of life. When one of the girls finally managed to reach Maston, her voice broke with panic. She could only say that they had been kept inside Cornelius's house for 3 days. They said they had been mistreated given substances that clouded their minds and felt powerless to leave. When they were finally found, according to accounts, both were in a horrifying state, shaken, trembling, their eyes wide with terror, as if they had just lived through a nightmare. That was how Joe Piastro, Playboy's head of security, described the scene. One of the sisters recounted that inside the locked house, she had to listen to her siblings' muffled cries from the next room. But instead of calling the police, Playboy acted differently. A cleanup crew appeared. They took the 2 girls away, handled everything quietly, and the incident vanished from any official record. No report was filed, no investigation took place. And just days later, Don Cornelius was seen back at the Playboy Mansion as if nothing had ever happened. To the public, Don Cornelius was the father of Soul Train, the man who brought Aretha Franklin, James Brown, and Michael Jackson to millions of American viewers. But in Maston's account, that same name was tied to one of Hollywood's darkest secrets. The silence of the system made the story even more chilling. Why was the police never called? Why were the identities of the 2 women never revealed? And why did it take until 2022, nearly a decade after Cornelius's death, for these accusations to surface? Media and public reaction. When the episode The Bunnies and the Cleanup Crew aired on A&E in 2022, audiences across America were stunned. On People Newsweek and Business Insider headlines exploded Soul Train creator Don Cornelius, accused of sexual assault in Secrets of Playboy. Within hours of airing, social media lit up with comments, shock, outrage, disbelief. On the other side, the Cornelius family quickly responded. Tony Cornelius, his son, told People, "It's an unbelievable story without real proof." He argued that the accusations were more sensational than factual, and that no evidence existed to prove them. But in that silence, one thing became clear. Playboy culture had existed as a closed fortress, a world where powerful men could do whatever they wanted without fear of consequences. And Cornelius, according to these accounts, had benefited from that system. There were no police records, no official documents, only the memories of those who had lived inside Playboy's closed world. And yet, the very absence of evidence made the secret all the more haunting. Secrets of Playboy opened a door into the dark backstage of an empire long celebrated as a paradise of pleasure and freedom. But hidden within, according to Maston, were nights of violence and fear, where power could silence every cry for help. And the name Don Cornelius, once a symbol of love, peace and soul, now echoed with an entirely different resonance, a resonance of secrecy, unanswered questions, and hidden power. Behind those 3 horrifying days was not just a secret, but a terrifying shield of protection. You can't help but ask, how did Don Cornelius escape any investigation? The answer lies in a shadowy world of power, where silence was bought with privilege. Power in the shadows. Look at the position Don Cornelius held in the entertainment industry, and within the shadow network of power surrounding the Playboy Mansion. Cornelius was not just the host of a television show. He was a heavyweight VIP, a familiar name at the Playboy Mansion, where lavish parties and hidden connections wove together like a spider's web. As the father of Soul Train, he was respected by Hollywood's elite. In the world of Playboy, that meant untouchable privilege. During the 1970s and 1980s, the Playboy Mansion was a symbol of power and pleasure. The press called it the playground of the stars, where actors, musicians, politicians, and billionaires mingled with young women. But behind the disco beats and champagne-filled pools, according to many former bunnies, there existed a shadow system of control. In Secrets of Playboy, P.J. Maston and other witnesses claimed that Hugh Hefner maintained a cleanup crew, a secret team dedicated to handling scandals. If a VIP guest caused trouble, they would step in before the police ever arrived, remove the victim, arrange for silence, and erase all traces. No police, no publicity. Everything handled internally, Maston told People. It was this protective wall that allowed many powerful names to escape the light of justice. And Don Cornelius, according to testimony, was one of those shielded. This mechanism was not unfamiliar in Hollywood. Bill Cosby, America's dad on television, lived for decades under a similar shield until dozens of women came forward. R. Kelly, the R&B star, was also protected by the music industry throughout the 1990s and 2000s despite endless allegations. The common thread is clear fame. Power and silence become a shield. For Cornelius, that shield was even harder to penetrate. He wasn't only a TV host, he was a black cultural icon, the man who opened the doors of television to an entire generation of artists. James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson. To the community, he was a source of pride, and any accusation against him could easily be dismissed as unbelievable. It's no coincidence that Tony Cornelius, his son, called the accusations from Secrets of Playboy an unbelievable story without real proof. Indeed, no police records, no court rulings, no public identities of the victims. But that very absence reflected how the system worked, where evidence could be swallowed whole by the silence of privilege. But power is only half the story. The other half, darker and more haunting, lies within Don Cornelius himself, a man of two faces, where the spotlight of public glory stood in stark contrast to the shadows of his private life. The two-faced man, the public icon. In the eyes of millions of American viewers, Don Cornelius was more than a television host. He was the architect of an entire musical era. Beginning in 1971, Cornelius transformed Soul Train into the first nationally syndicated show created and hosted by a black man, a breakthrough unprecedented in the history of American television. Every weekend, he appeared on stage in a crisp suit, his hair slicked back, walking with poise. His gaze was sharp, yet confident, his deep voice hypnotizing the audience. And then came the familiar closing line at the end of every episode, "Love, peace, and soul." For the 1970s and 1980s generation, those three words weren't just a farewell. They were a cultural declaration. To the public, he was a symbol of pride, elegance, a cultural father figure, an image of untarnished light. But that was only half the truth. When the stage lights went off and the audience went home, a very different Don Cornelius emerged. Edgy, volatile, and burdened with dark corners in his private life. A stormy private life. In his later years, the spotlight was no longer enough to hide the cracks in Cornelius's private life. Eventually, it all erupted onto the front pages. In October 2008, Cornelius was arrested by Los Angeles police after a domestic violence incident at his Beverly Hills mansion. The victim was his young wife, Victoria Avila Cornelius. In the court documents, he was accused of assaulting her, an image completely at odds with the polished gentleman in fine suits that audiences had come to know. Cornelius denied the most serious charges, but by March 2009, he was forced to plead no contest to a lesser charge in a court settlement. The outcome: 36 months of probation, along with a restraining order prohibiting violence against his wife. The headline screamed, "The man of love, peace, and soul faces domestic violence charges." The public was stunned, confronted with the stark contrast between the calm TV host and the cold legal reality of a criminal record. The scandal quickly destroyed his marriage. Victoria filed for divorce soon after, and by 2009 it was finalized. In court, Cornelius bluntly told the judge he wanted the process over as quickly as possible, because his health was failing and he didn't have much time left. That admission hit like a thunderclap. Was he foreshadowing a tragic end? The turning point in health. In truth, those close to Cornelius had long noticed that his decline began after brain surgery in 1982. At the time, he underwent a major operation to treat a congenital brain blood vessel defect, a high-risk procedure. Afterward, he began to suffer from sudden seizures, memory loss, and noticeable personality changes. From a composed host, Cornelius gradually became irritable, short-tempered, and prone to losing control. He even admitted as much during a 2009 court appearance: "I am dealing with some very serious health issues. I am not the man I used to be." Friends and family believed the surgery left lasting neurological damage, transforming Cornelius into a different person. Those changes, combined with the relentless pressures of fame, pushed him into a spiral of violence, tension, and despair in his final years. The image of Don Cornelius was in many ways bipolar. On television, he was elegant, composed to the embodiment of refinement and cultural magnetism. In his private life, he was volatile, violent, haunted by failing health and a deep fear of death. This contradiction made his legacy complicated. The public once saw Cornelius as a cultural hero, but court records, accounts of violence, and reports of his changing personality revealed a very different Don Cornelius. The unanswered question: did the 1982 brain surgery create a new Don Cornelius, a man torn between light and darkness? Or had those shadows always existed, waiting for the moment to break free? That question still hangs in the air. From a polished gentleman to an unstable, irritable man, Cornelius became a prisoner of his own body and mind. And then the final tragedy struck: the mysterious death, February 1st, 2012. A quiet morning in Beverly Hills was shattered by the sound of police sirens. News spread quickly: Don Cornelius was dead. The creator of Soul Train, the man who ended every episode with the iconic words, "Love, peace, and soul," had chosen to end his life with a gunshot. He was 75 years old, and his death sent shockwaves across America. The final call moments. Before pulling the trigger, Cornelius called his son, Tony. In a weary, almost resigned voice, he said hauntingly, "I don't know how much longer I can take this." It was both a confession and a farewell. Tony later recalled that he felt the desperation in his father's voice, but he never imagined that only hours later the tragedy would occur. That final call became an indelible scar in the memory of the Cornelius family. Dark speculations. Why would a cultural icon like Cornelius take his own life? The media and those close to him quickly floated several theories. First, severe depression. A broken marriage, domestic violence scandals, and chilling accusations that surfaced late in his life all drove Cornelius into despair. Second, the after effects of his 1982 brain surgery. After undergoing the risky operation to repair a congenital blood vessel defect, he suffered frequent seizures, memory lapses, and constant pain. Family members said he often complained about the relentless suffering. Third, the shadow of Alzheimer's. Some sources suggested Cornelius showed early signs of the disease, filling him with dread at the thought of old age consuming him. All speculation pointed to one grim reality. In his final years, Cornelius was cornered physically and mentally. And when every last hope dissolved, he chose the only form of control he had left: the decision to end his own life. The funeral and public shock. The funeral of Don Cornelius was held at Inglewood Park Cemetery in California. It was a solemn, somber ceremony. Family, close friends, and artists tied to Soul Train attended Aretha Franklin, Gladys Knight, Quincy Jones, Smokey Robinson. All expressed their grief. Aretha Franklin said Soul Train was our voice, and Don Cornelius was its soul. His passing is an irreplaceable loss. But while the funeral unfolded, the public was consumed by conflicting emotions. On one hand, they mourned the man who dedicated his life to bringing black culture into the spotlight. On the other, they could not forget the dark secrets. Cornelius's death closed a major chapter in American television. Yet at the same time, it sparked an unending debate. Did he leave behind a legacy or a shadow? No one denies that Soul Train changed history. The show was not just about music and dance. It was a platform where black artists could appear on national television celebrated in a society still weighed down by prejudice. Cornelius was hailed as the father of Soul Train, a pioneer. But no one forgets the cracks either. The domestic violence case of 2008-2009, the personality changes after brain surgery, and most of all, the chilling accounts revealed in Secrets of Playboy. Cornelius thus became a symbol of contradiction, a man both honored and doubted, a legend both admired and haunted by darkness. A haunting ending. On February 1st, 2012, that gunshot did more than end Don Cornelius's life. It rang like an alarm bell, a reminder that behind every glittering light of Hollywood, there are shadows beyond measure. Cornelius lived as a legend, but died in isolation. Will he be remembered as a cultural hero? Or as the man who carried Hollywood's darkest secret? The gunshot of 2012 ended everything. Yet the story truly began decades earlier, in a poor Chicago neighborhood, where a boy named Don Cornelius first heard the sound of soul music through an old radio. Flashback childhood. In Chicago, Don Cornelius was born on September 27, 1936, in Chicago into a working-class family. His parents worked tirelessly to provide for their children, but the times were far from easy. America was steeped in racial tension, and black people were pushed to the margins of society, stripped of opportunities to rise. Chicago at the time was a city of contradictions. On one hand, it pulsed with the sounds of soul blues and jazz pouring out of clubs on the South Side. On the other, it was also a place where black communities were confined to impoverished neighborhoods with limited access to education and jobs. It was in this environment that Don Cornelius grew up, carrying a quiet anger at injustice while nurturing a fierce desire to break free from that cycle. From an early age, Cornelius stood out. His teachers described him as ambitious, determined, and unwilling to compromise easily. While other kids played basketball, he would spend hours glued to the family's old radio, listening intently to the rising wave of soul jazz and gospel. That radio, with its deep-voiced announcers and soulful music, planted in Cornelius an unshakable passion for broadcasting and the stage. He attended DuSable High School, a public school on Chicago's South Side that produced many prominent black figures. There, Cornelius began to shape his identity, a taste for sharp dressing, a dignified walk, and precise speech. He was especially captivated by how music could alter human emotion, from the soaring gospel in church to the free-flowing jazz on neighborhood stages. To Cornelius, music was more than entertainment. It was a key to affirm identity and transcend social injustice. Friends recalled that even as a child, Cornelius had a distant gaze, as if he refused to accept a future of being just another factory worker in Chicago. He wanted more, a stage, a voice, a chance to change how the world saw black people. That childhood marked by poverty and prejudice forged Don Cornelius into a man who would never give up. He learned discipline, how to keep a cool head in adversity, and above all, how to dream big. The military and iron discipline. After a childhood filled with dreams beside the family's old radio, Don Cornelius stepped into a new chapter. In the 1950s, America was in the midst of the Cold War, and young men across the country were being called to serve. Cornelius was no exception. He joined the United States Marine Corps. If Chicago had taught him about injustice and ambition, the military shaped him with iron discipline. Cornelius learned to stand tall, dress sharply, and speak with precision. Grueling drills, relentless commands, and long marches under the scorching sun transformed the boy from Chicago into a man who mastered composure and confidence. It was here that Cornelius honed the demeanor that would later captivate millions of viewers: a firm voice, a calm gaze, a steady walk. Fellow Marines recalled that he was often the spokesperson for his unit, able to communicate clearly and command attention. The Marine Corps was not only a military school, it was Cornelius's first stage. There he learned how to shine before a crowd, a lesson that would become the foundation of his legendary career as a host. When he left the service, Cornelius carried the discipline of the military with him, but his heart still belonged to music. And fate led him to an unexpected crossroads, from police officer to golden voice on the radio, from police officer to radio announcer. Back in Chicago, Cornelius sought a stable job. He joined the Chicago Police Department as a patrol officer, but after a short time, he realized the job wasn't for him. The rigid procedures and restrictive duties made Cornelius, a man hungry for creativity, feel suffocated. He made a bold decision. He left the police uniform behind to pursue his passion for radio. Cornelius began testing his skills at WVON Voice of the Negro, a local station dedicated to serving Chicago's Black community. From his very first audition, Cornelius's deep, measured, commanding voice left a strong impression. Station managers recognized he had the it factor of a radio announcer, authoritative yet magnetic, a voice that listeners couldn't turn away from. Within just a few months, Cornelius became a familiar name on WVON's airwaves. He delivered the news, introduced soul records, and connected with the community. More importantly, he became acutely aware of a gap in television. There was no program that represented Black music culture. Cornelius began nurturing a bold idea, a television show dedicated to soul and funk, where Black audiences could see themselves reflected, and Black artists could perform without limits. At first it was just a sketch of a plan, but over time it grew sharper in his mind. He once told a friend, "If white America has American Bandstand, then we deserve a stage of our own." Soul Train. A cultural earthquake. In 1970 in Chicago, a bold dream became reality. Don Cornelius, the former police officer turned radio announcer, brought his idea of a stage for Black music to local television. At first, Soul Train was modest, a group of young people dancing to soul and funk with simple interviews in between. But instantly, it carried an extraordinary appeal, something never before seen in American television history. From Chicago to nationwide. Just a year later, CBS recognized its massive potential. In 1971, Soul Train went national, becoming an instant phenomenon. Dubbed the Black American Bandstand, the show sparked a cultural earthquake. For the first time, the music style and energy of the Black community were broadcast to millions of American households. The colorful stage, the dazzling dance floor, the confident young Black men and women showing off their style, it all made for groundbreaking television. For many American families, Soul Train was more than just weekend entertainment. It was a cultural celebration. The launchpad of legends. Over nearly 4 decades, Soul Train became the launchpad for countless stars. James Brown brought the raw power of funk. Aretha Franklin lit up the stage with fiery vocals. Stevie Wonder mesmerized with his genius. Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5 gave breakthrough performances that made them global sensations. Whitney Houston, Prince Marvin Gaye, Earth, Wind and Fire, all of them once rode this Soul Train. And it wasn't just about music. Soul Train introduced dances that became iconic. The Soul Train line, where dancers took turns strutting down the runway to show off their unique moves, became a cultural ritual. It spread into parties, clubs, and even African American weddings across the nation. Beyond music, a lifestyle. What made Soul Train special was not only the music, but also the fashion and lifestyle it showcased. Shimmering disco outfits, leather jackets, flared pants, wide-brim hats, and bold Afro hairstyles created a visual language of Black America. In the 1970s and 1980s, Cornelius turned the show into a cultural catwalk, a place where the Black community displayed pride in their identity. For white audiences, it was a window into a vibrant creative world, often ignored by mainstream society. Don Cornelius, the king of Black culture. If Soul Train was a storming locomotive, Don Cornelius was the conductor. On stage, he appeared in sharp suits, his deep voice beating like the heart of the show. His catchphrase, "Love, Peace, and Soul," became his personal brand, earning him the title of spiritual father to Black American audiences. Cornelius wasn't just the host, he was the producer, the man in control of the rhythm. He kept a tight grip to ensure Soul Train always carried a positive message, one that celebrated the community. And that control cemented his place as the king of black culture on television, a role no one else could fill. A true empire. By the 1980s, Soul Train was no longer just a television show. It had grown into an entertainment empire. The Soul Train Music Awards honoring black artists. The Soul Train Lady of Soul Awards celebrating female voices. Spin-off products, national tours, VHS tapes, all reaching audiences across the country. Don Cornelius, once an ordinary ex-cop, had become a millionaire, a powerful producer, and a cultural icon. He proved that one bold idea could change the course of American television history. A legacy carried by his son. After Cornelius's shocking death in 2012, his son Tony Cornelius vowed not to let his father's tragedy be the final chapter. He founded the Don Cornelius Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness about depression, mental health, and suicide prevention. Tony shared that his father's final words on the phone, "I don't know how much longer I can take," this drove him to act. For Tony, it was not just a personal pain, but also a reminder that millions of others silently endure the same struggles. Through the foundation, Tony has organized educational programs, workshops, and community support, especially for black communities who often have less access to mental health resources. In this way, he extended his father's legacy, but with a new purpose. If Soul Train had delivered love, peace, and soul through music, the foundation brings love, peace, and soul to mental well-being for future generations. Thanks to these efforts, the name Don Cornelius is tied not only to music or scandal, but also to a human-centered social movement. It is how the Cornelius family transformed pain into strength, turning personal tragedy into seeds of hope for the community. At the same time, Cornelius's death also raised major questions about his wealth and material legacy. According to court records, he left behind an estate estimated at around $10 million, with sources citing between $8 and $15 million, including his Beverly Hills mansion, the rights to Soul Train, and other investments. Part of this estate went to his family, with Tony taking on an important role in preserving the Soul Train brand. Today, when people remember Don Cornelius, they cannot see him in only one dimension. He was both a cultural genius and a flawed man. And perhaps it is this very contradiction that gives his story lasting weight. It reminds us that even legends carry shadows they cannot escape. In the end, Don Cornelius left the world with a message, but not a perfect one. Love, peace, and soul was not only a beautiful slogan, but also a haunting paradox. It was both a promise and a warning. Love, peace, and soul are fragile and can shatter if we let silence consume us.